Hello, Julie here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing with you 3 cards that I've made, and the embellishment or the feature of each of those cards is a layered flower. I've created my own card bases for each of these cards. They are 5 inches square and I've used 240 GSM white cardstock. I've cut my card base at 10 inches by 5 and then scored and folded at 5 inches. So I'm going to start with this card, and it's a Z fold, so I've just folded the front of the card back on itself. I'm using a Kaiser Crafts Dream Big 6-inch paper pad for any pattern papers that I'm using on these cards. I choose 2 pattern papers and I cut one so that it's 4 3/4 by 4 3/4 inches square. And then from another sheet I cut 2 pieces that are 2 1/4 by 4 3/4, and they're going to be the front of the half panel and the back of the half panel. I also cut another piece of the plain pink because there's 2 sheets in a pad, and I cut that so that it was 3 inches square, and a piece of white cardstock that is 3 1/4 inches square. That's going to be my front panel. To create the sentiment for this card, I'm using this Woodware collection stamp. It's called Word Fragments, and I'm going to heat emboss that. I'm going to stamp it with a black pigment ink stamp pad, and then use clear embossing powder and my heat gun to set that. I'm going to stamp it onto some of the pink pattern paper. Once that's ready to go, I attach it to a piece, I trim the pink paper down first, then I attach that to a piece of white cardstock, trim that down so that I've got a fine border all the way around the pink, and then attach it to another piece of the pink cardstock. I ink the edges of each layer as I go. Time to create my embellishment now. I'm using this Heartfelt Creation stamp. It's called Daisy Patch Flowers, and I'm going to stamp the largest flower twice, once onto the piece of pink cardstock that I cut for the front of the card, and once onto another piece of the pink cardstock. I'm going to heat emboss this and then fussy cut it. I'm also going to stamp the next size down of the flower and do the same thing with that. So the 2 that are on the piece of loose pink cardstock are going to be heat embossed. So I've stamped them with pigment ink and I'm heat embossing them with clear embossing powder. So I'm going to start to assemble the front section of the card. I have inked around the edge of this pink cardstock and I'm just gluing that to the larger white cardstock panel that I cut earlier. Then I'm going to shape my loose flowers, so the larger one and the smaller one that I just created. I'm going to use my flower shaping tool and an old stubby holder and put some shape into those petals. When I'm happy with the shape of the petals, I'm going to attach the smaller flower on top of the larger flower and then attach them on top of the card. I'm just using liquid glue to attach them, and I'm offsetting the petals of each layer so that the flower looks a bit fuller. Once I've got those attached, I'm going to then add some chipboard scraps to the back of my greeting and attach that below the flower. Time now to attach my panel to the front of my card. I use liquid glue to attach the panel that we've just created so that it overlaps the Z fold section of the card base, and only make sure that I put glue on half of the panel so that I don't glue my card shut. I add a rhinestone sticker to the centre of the flower from this pack of Anko rhinestone stickers. I'm going to put a verse inside of the card. To do that, I'm going to use this scrapbook.com stamp, and it's called Life Handmade. No, not sure what it's called, to be honest. Anyway, I took the greeting in there that says thinking of you on your birthday and wishing you everything happy. I stamped that with the black pigment ink, and then once again I heat embossed that with the clear embossing powder, and I made sure that when I put it in the card it was hidden behind that front panel that we created with the flower on it. And that completes our first card for today. On to our second card. I'm working on a 5-inch square piece of white cardstock here. This is not the front of my card. I'm using this stamp, and I'm afraid that I don't know what brand or what it's called or anything. It's just an all-over stamp of daisies. Now I'm stamping that down with black pigment ink, and I'm using my stamping platform because I'm not too sure how many times I'll need to stamp this. And then, so I'm stamping it with black pigment ink, and then I'm going to use my clear embossing powder to emboss the whole image. To create my focal point for this card, I'm going to use this block stamp. It's called Giant Flowers, and it's made by Embossing Arts, and it was 2001, so you see it's 20 years old. I'm going to use my powder puff tool and apply some powder to the white cardstock. Then I'm going to use Versamark ink and stamp that twice onto the white cardstock, and then heat emboss it with some black embossing powder. I'm going to back my stamped daisy background with some gold mirror card. So I cut the gold mirror card to 4 3/4 inches square. I also trim my daisy panel down so that it's 4 1/2 inches square. I use my art glitter glue to attach my daisy panel to my gold mirror card. Now I attach this panel to the front of the card. Time to work on my flower embellishment now. I'm going to give the 2 fussy cut flowers some shape using my flower shaping tool. I'm just sort of pushing into the middle to make the petals pop up. I don't want to actually shape each petal for this flower. Once I've got the shaping done, I use some glue, just a little dab in the middle, and attach one layer on top of the other. The layered flower is then attached to the bottom left section of the card front, just using a bit of glue. I'm going to finish the flower off by adding another one of those crystal gems. This is the same type of gem that I added to the first card we created. The sentiment comes from a sheet from Uniquely Creative that came in a kit. It says, I just wanted to say, so I cut that strip out, cut a little fishtail in one end, attached it to a piece of chipboard, and then attached it to the front of the card with some glue. And there we have our second card for today. So on to our third and final card for today. This card is pretty bright and colourful. I'm going to use this woodware stamp, and it's called 5 Daisies. I have cut a piece of white cardstock that's 5 inches square, just a panel, and I'm going to stamp the stamp onto that. It won't fit on there completely, so some of it will be cut off. and I'm also going to stamp it onto another scrap piece of cardstock. Because the stamp is going to overhang the edges of the cardstock, I have to position my piece of cardstock that it's being stamped onto away from the edge so that the stamp will sit in the platform properly. Once I've got that in position, I then go ahead and stamp that with Versamark embossing ink, and I will heat emboss both sets of flowers using black embossing powder. I saw these watercolour brush pens in Kmart and I wanted to give them a try, so today that's what I'm doing. I'm going to colour both sets of flowers, and I'm going to start off by using a yellow all over the flower. Then I'm going to use the bright pink over the top of the yellow, and then my water brush to shade the two together, and I end up with the yellow and orange flowers. So I'm going to do this for all of the flowers on both stampings. I'm also going to colour the leaves on the 5-inch square piece. So what I'm going to do, of course, is cut out the flowers from the loose piece of cardstock and shape them and attach them onto the 5-inch square base so that they've got that dimension. But the leaves will be only the leaves that are stamped onto the 5-inch piece. I'm only showing the colouring for one flower and one leaf here because if I left the camera running for the whole process, this video would be very long. So I've finished colouring all of the flowers and leaves that I want, and I have fussy cut the extra flowers. I haven't cut all of the flowers, I've just cut 3 so that some will look like they're on a lower level, giving that extra dimension. So the panel that the flowers are stamped on is the same size as the front of the cardstock, and I wanted to put a border around the panel. So I'm cutting the panel down to 4.5 inches square. I found a piece of orange paper in my scrap box, and I've cut that down to 4.75 inches square, and I'm going to ink around the edge of that. Time to start assembling my card now. I used my art glitter glue to attach the orange piece of cardstock to the card front, making sure that it's opening in the right direction. Then I attached the white cardstock that has the flowers stamped onto it. Once again, I used my glue to attach that. I used the same technique to shape these flowers as I used on the first flowers, so I'm using my flower shaping tool to sort of just pull in from the edge of these flowers, so it sort of just gives the petals a bit of a curve, and then I'll turn them over and push down into the centre of the flower, and that makes the petals come back up. I do that for all 3 of the fussy cut flowers. Once I've got those flowers shaped, I add some foam tape or foam squares to the back of them and then attach them on top of the flowers that they correspond with on the card panel. I used my yellow watercolour brush to fill in the centres of the flowers, and then with the yellow, and then I used the orange one to just put a few dots of orange around in the shaded area of the centre. The greeting for this card comes from one of my sheets. I print out sheets of various greetings, different fonts, different sizes, just a whole sheet of them, and keep them handy for when I want a greeting. So this one I'm just using one of those. I'm going to trim it down, ink around the edge of it, then attach it to a piece of the orange paper that I used between my two card front panels, and then attach that to a piece of chipboard and then attach it to my card front. I wanted to put something on the inside of the card, so I chose this orange wood grain paper from the Kaiser Craft Dream Big paper pad. I trimmed that down so that it was 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, inked around the edge of it, and then attached it to the inside of the card. So there we have our 3 cards for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching my video. I've been wanting to try layering flowers on card fronts for some time, and I'm glad I got around to it today. I enjoyed doing it. I hope you've enjoyed watching the video, and hopefully you'll give this a try yourself. If you're not already a subscriber, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, and thank you for being here today. I hope you'll join me for my next video.